Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Rajender. We are very pleased to welcome you to the second webinar in our four-part series. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that most of the participants in today's sessions will be joining from across Canada, from many different Indigenous territories. We recognize that the lands on which we live, work, and learn are the traditional territories of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I would encourage everyone to take a moment to reflect on the territory you are specifically joining from today. Thanks, everyone, for that brief moment of reflection. Now, a quick introduction about us. So, many of you are joining, and you might already know about us, but the DAES is a public policy and leadership think tank at Toronto Metropolitan University. We are working at the intersection of technology, education, and democracy with a broader overarching goal to build shared prosperity and citizenship for Canada. Our work involves policy research, leadership development, community building, and convenings such as today. One of our key projects in K-12 is kind of named as Heads Up, which is focused on advancing the case for better and more consistent phone-free policies across Canada. Within that project, we have this today's webinar series, The Lunchroom, Making Phone-Free Schools Work. In this webinar series, we bring together school leaders like Lisa and Jonathan today, and also Chris from across the country to share kind of candid on the ground lessons about what is working, what are the challenges with phone free policies that they see in their own practice. We are very happy to be partnering with this for this particular webinar series with the EdCan and Phone Free School Movement Canada. So I would actually invite my colleagues to introduce their organizations one by one. Let's start with Kathleen from EdCan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kathleen Lane. I'm the Executive Director of the EdCan Network. EdCan is a national education charity dedicated to empowering education professionals with evidence, practical expertise, and a collaborative network to enhance learning and well-being in our schools and school systems across Canada. Our vision is an education ecosystem where students, staff, and school communities thrive. A big part of our work is highlighting what is working across jurisdictions. And for that reason, we're very excited to be partnering with the DAES on this series. Phone-free schools, cell phone restrictions, how to navigate them effectively. We know the benefits for students, but the question comes into how do we roll out that policy in ways that are supportive to everybody? So we do things like publish the Education Canada magazine, along with other evidence-informed resources, such as research synthesis reports, discussion kits, fact sheets, as different ways to share what is working across all different aspects of education. We also convene a variety of virtual events, working groups, and peer learning communities, enabling education professionals to share evidence and expertise across jurisdictions. I'll put a little bit of contact information in the chat in case you are interested in following up with us.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathleen. I'll go to Angie now.
Thanks, Rajinder. Happy to be here. I'm Angie Clark. I'm the Executive Director of Phone Free Schools Movement Canada. Just to give you a little bit of background, I've been working in the education system since I started teaching back in 1998. I've taught in both elementary and secondary schools in Quebec and Ontario, and most recently I spent a few years as an academic advisor at Queen's University. So over the years, I've really had a front row seat to how technology has increasingly shaped and disrupted students' learning, well-being, and relationships. And I'm also a parent of 3 young adults, so I've experienced the challenges of navigating that in my own home as well. And that's really what led me to bring the Phone Free Schools movement to Canada. I truly believe that creating phone-free environments from the first bell to the last bell across all grade levels is one of the most effective and low-cost guardrails we can put in place to protect students' attention and well-being and give them the space for real connection free from the pressures and distractions of the online world. So through our ambassador program, we're building a growing network of parents, educators, and school leaders across the country who are also working towards that same goal, to bring back the conditions our students need to learn, connect, and thrive. We provide practical tools, resources, and community support to help folks do that. And so I just want to say thanks again to Rajinder and the Heads Up team for hosting this webinar series. I really think that these conversations are so important because they inspire and give courage to those who know things need to change but aren't quite sure where to start. It's really important for everyone to know that we're here to support along the way as well. So I'll also be adding my contact info to the chat. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Angie, and thanks, Kathleen, both. So, um, so with that context, before we kind of like dive into the panel, just a small update for everyone, because if you had registered for this, when you might have registered for this webinar, you might have seen there were actually three speakers and one moderator. One of the speaker had to actually drop off because they are traveling in Europe and their flights got cancelled because of the ongoing war. So that they couldn't join us today. But we have Lisa, we have Jonathan and Chris with us. So the broader goal with this webinar series, all of the webinars put together, is like our desire is to amplify the voices of the leaders who are implementing and actually putting these practices in place in their own context. Announcing policies is just kind of like important first step, but that's where it stops. It's actually leaders and staff members and teachers and students who live it day by day in the school. That's where the nuance lives, and that's why we have this webinar series in place, so that we can kind of like create a space where people can learn from others' experiences. We'll be recording this webinar and we'll be posting later on our channels, and we'll be sharing that further. Um, Anyone who is listening, if you have any questions today throughout, please put those questions in the chat, and towards the end, in the last 5 to 10 minutes, we'll take those questions if those are not already addressed through the discussion. Yeah, so with that context, I would actually hand it over to now today's moderator, Chris Hicks, who is the chairperson of Council of School Leaders in Manitoba, and he's also a fellow with Heads Up Project here at DAES and supporting our work, advancing basically for phone-free policies in Manitoba and beyond. So over to you, Chris, for your own introduction, introducing Lisa, Jonathan, and then dive into the discussion. And me and
Yeah.
G. Kathleen, we can go off screen now. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and welcome everybody. Bonjour and bonjour. Yeah, my name is Chris Hicks. I'm the chairperson. We call it the chairperson of the Council of School Leaders of the Manitoba Teachers Society because we're in scope. We have the same collective agreement as the teachers in Manitoba, and I'm on. This is a seconded position, so it's basically a political position. I have to run in an election if I want to continue my term, which is fine. That's the way we set it up. It's a very busy organization now, so that's what I do. And our job is primarily to support principals and vice principals in supporting their teachers. That's the kind of underwritten goal. But we've also added, we call it endorsing it rather than recruitment. And we've added aspiring school leaders to all of our documentation. So where we would say something like, the Council of School Leaders supports principals and vice principals in Manitoba. It's now codified that principals, vice principals, and aspiring school leaders as well, because well, the job has to go on after people like me retire, and we want to be able to give them the best perspective that we can. I can say that I've the last year I taught full time was 99 2000, so you can tell sometimes my credibility can be questioned when I'm advising teachers and stuff. But I've also been in administration for so long, I just can't think of doing anything else. So, and as far as smartphone risks of smartphone and the dangers of smartphone overuse, especially, it began for me in 2017 when I read an article in the Atlantic Monthly by now she's probably the public face of smartphone research along with Jonathan Haidt. Her name is Jen Twenge. She published an executive summary about some work that they've been doing, looking at trends and stuff, connecting it to mostly to adolescent anxiety and mental health. And that article was published in 2017. So that's when I started really, really paying attention to this. But in the meantime, I'm happy to introduce our two main speakers here. We have Lisa Mansfield and we have Jonathan Ettinger. Jonathan comes to us from, it looks like outside of a major center in Nova Scotia, so we would call that rural Nova Scotia. He has 17 years of experience in education and in the system, including 14 in educational leadership. Oh, so you taught even less than I did, Jonathan. That's great. His background includes serving as a system consultant and leading elementary and high school communities as a school principal. He's currently at a school named Maple Grove Education Center, which serves approximately 550 students, grades 6 through 8. A committed, inclusive practice style leader, student-centered environments, and supporting effective teaching practices. I'll leave that for Jonathan to say on his own. And then we also from Nova Scotia, Lisa Mansfield, a dedicated educator with 25 years experience in public education, 14 in the school admin, uh, who has a deep commitment to student success, instructional leadership, and building strong communities, and has a wide variety of experiences, including fly-in remote Northern Canadian schools. And those I'm telling everybody should do that at least once or twice in their career, and also rural and inner city schools. So a very broad perspective. So that's great. And I'll also leave Lisa. She lives outside of Halifax, but I'll leave her to finish that off. And they can tell a little bit, because one of the first questions, one of the first statements is to ask for them to um, talk about their environment. So I guess I'll start with you, Jonathan, if you don't mind. Um, if you don't mind giving us a little bit of a context about your school, where it is, what grades you serve. I guess I said that already. Your demographic and anything that shapes your school community that you think would be beneficial to us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the introduction, and I certainly appreciate the offer to be a part of this. I guess, like you mentioned, we're in rural Nova Scotia, about probably 3.5 hours southwest of where Lisa is. So just outside of the town of Yarmouth, which
Okay.
has a population of approximately 8,000. So it's a middle school about 10 minutes outside of that town, serving kids in grades 6, 7, and 8. So the most entertaining age group, as you can imagine, from 11, 12 to 13, 14. Overall, the area, it's primarily industry-wise. You're looking at small fishing communities. That's the primary industry. A lot of very interesting groups of communities, certainly for sure down here, where we have a good mix of individuals from a wide variety of backgrounds. We have a healthy population of African Nova Scotian students, as well as Indigenous students with some communities that we serve, obviously fairly close. Um, Overall, like you said, about 550 year by year. We vary between 550 to 600 students, a staff of about 40 teaching staff, and then with the support staff, about 70 in total, I would say. So a pretty dedicated group that from 8:45 our time to 2:45 are responsible for shaping the young minds of our future down in this area. So, like you said, very fortunate to be a part of this and looking forward to the conversation.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you very much for that. Lisa, how about you? What can you tell us about the demographic and the environment you're serving?
So I am currently sitting at the base of Citadel Hill in the capital of Nova Scotia, Halifax. Our school, we cross the street and we can be on the hill. We are downtown and just nicely based in the middle of the peninsula. We serve grades 10 to 12 here at Citadel High, with just under 1,700 students currently enrolled, projected to be 19 in the next couple of years. We are in a really nice area in a very nice newer building. And we have a wide variety of students, ranging from students with socioeconomic backgrounds that are quite affluent to students who are definitely coming from more impoverished communities. We have a large EAL population in our school, and in fact, on any given day can be enrolling 3 or 4 new students that are coming from just about anywhere in the world. With that comes lots of really positives and an interesting growing number of countries represented here in our school. It also comes with some disadvantages because we don't always have the resources at our immediate fingertips to service them, but we do our absolute best to make things work. We have 125 staff members. And as you can imagine, any day we could have 50 substitutes in the building, depending on the day. So it's a hopping place to be. Our school starts at 9:20 here on the Atlantic time, and we dismiss at 3:25. The school building opens at 7 though, and there are often students standing at the door waiting when admin arrive. So it makes for a very busy day when we start that early.
Lisa, can I ask you to repeat? I think you cut out on, at least for me anyway, when you were mentioning your enrollment number. Can you tell me what
Sure. So right now we're currently sitting at 1,672 exactly.
Okay.
And we are projected at this point to be 1,900 by in the next year or so, 2 years.
Yeah. How does is that a normal jump, 300 kids?
No, it's not normal, but it is increasingly the reality of us here on the East Coast.
Okay.
So it's our new normal.
And then one other question, because this is a plague for many school leaders. When you say you might have 50 substitutes in the building, do you actually have that many people? Like you have a sub list?
Substituting has been a challenge
Okay.
here in Nova Scotia. I'm sure Jonathan would agree, and in the rural communities even more so. I would say in many ways, we are very fortunate to be able to access substitutes. We do now in our province have non-licensed subbing.
Yeah. Okay.
And we also are able to, in certain situations, use our practice teachers that are coming out from the universities.
Oh, nice.
So we're usually able to avoid coverage, although we've been known to be in a classroom or two ourselves in recent years.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Just it's interesting that the sub shortages and the connection to enforcing smartphone regulations, et cetera, just might be an interesting look sometime to see how that works.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, well, that's great. Thanks. Well, I'm glad to have you, and I'm looking forward to what you have to say. So, the next question is kind of related to the sort of the origin of your phone policy, like when it started. What kind of what are sort of the parameters of it? What are the meat and potatoes of it all? I'll start by saying in many places in Manitoba, schools implemented smartphone. Well, in my school, an outright ban for K-8, and we started tinkering with rules for high school about 2.5 years before the government actually mandated it in 2024. So maybe you could start on this one, Lisa. Tell us about your smartphone policy, its history, and where's the primary, like, is it mandated now provincially?
Mm-hmm. So because Jonathan and I are both here in Nova Scotia, Jonathan, feel free to jump in if I mix anything up or forget it. But in June of 2024, the policy was released. And so just not quite 2 years ago.
From the province?
From the province.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Prior to that, in our own schools, my experience has been that you could set your own rules, more or less. How effective they were when it came push to shove just sort of depends. And I'll leave it that part. My belief is that having the policy has been a huge help. So in 2024, families, communities, parents were all made aware. Students, got that initial, this is coming in September. It was released in June, but, gave it a little lag room to get into to the social media platforms and just be known. And so by the time we got to September, we were able to kind of have a better understanding of what we were able to do with it. It's a tiered system. So by that, my interpretation and my understanding is that from P to 8, there are certain things that are being done differently than in high schools. So Jonathan might want to speak more to the middle school, and that is because the schools are broken up in so many different configurations in Nova Scotia, it can be, I'm sure, tricky. But in P to 6, I would say, I think it is an absolute ban that students cannot have that. Is that correct, Jonathan?
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't been in one in a bit. And then from 7 and 8, or junior high, middle school.
Yeah, it's P to 6 is the ban, well,
Yeah.
outright ban basically, and then
Yeah.
7 and 8 follows the same as high school.
Oh,
So that's the discretion of the school in some areas, but the policy states that 7 to 12 students may be permitted to use their cell phone during non-instructional time, and there can be exceptions made that during instructional time with teachers' permission and based on it being used for outcome-based learning, that they can be given opportunity to use their cell phones as well. Otherwise, they're supposed to be shut off and stored. So the other parts of the policy are that they're not permitted in washrooms and locker rooms. And the policy does speak to asking the adults in the buildings to also try their best to mirror those same policies and not to be using their cell phones for non-work related things. I think those are the highlights, but Jonathan, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Those would certainly be the highlights of the provincial policy.
Mm-hmm.
can I ask, so you said P to 6, is that preschool to 6 or?
Yeah, our primary.
Primary?
Yes.
Okay. So is that an outright ban? Like they can't even bring them onto the property?
The expectation is,
Okay.
see, where 7 to 12 is they have or can be given permission during non-instructional time to use.
Yeah, okay.
P to 6, it's just they can't use it during the day. It doesn't really specify whether they can have them on their person or not.
What if you like how do you enforce that? Like how would like if you found a grade 4 student sitting on their phone in the middle, like what would happen there?
Yeah, so that's, I mean, I haven't had it because, again, I'm
Oh, yeah, you're 6 to
7 and 8, but
Yeah.
that, I guess that's what brought up part of our discussion as a staff when we made the decision where we are 6, 7, 8 to run a single policy instead of trying to allow our 6s some free time to use and 7, 8s to not, or the opposite, sorry, 6s not to use, 7, 8s to use. As a staff, we decided to sort of extend that and just outright say you couldn't use any student from bell to bell. But in terms of how it's addressed in Nova Scotia, it's actually, which has been helpful as well, we have a new code of conduct that was released provincially that came into effect this year. And within that code of conduct, one of the unacceptable behaviors is now classified as unacceptable use of a mobile device, which outlines some fairly straightforward age-appropriate consequences that you can follow.
So that would be a pretty concrete example of how it's being implemented if it's now identified in a code of conduct. So that's interesting. Did you find that you had support from parents?
For us initially, so I guess in my experience, we began last September as well implementing this. We started with some pretty clear communications out to families, community that we would be expecting from bell to bell students not to have access to a cell phone, not to use a mobile device or other electronic devices that can be connected to. Initially, we gave some time frame. You know, the first 2 weeks or so, we were a little more lenient with students, with reinforcing expectations. But overall, community was great. On board pretty quick. We did have a pocket of families with concerns that I found were easier to address by just reaching out and having that communication. Some of the biggest concerns were, the same thing that parents are typically concerned about. What if my child needs me? It's the middle of the day. What if they have to get in touch with me? What if something happens? And the easy response was, we're going back to a time where, when you were in school, what did you have to do? We have phones in the building. Student is able to come to the office. We can make contact. If there's anything major, we'll be in touch. It's not a big concern, but working through some of that with those families. And I mean, as administration, you get to know the families that are going to have a little more concerns with change like that you can sort of preempt and have some upfront conversation. But those were the biggest ones. It was a small group. The kids overall did better with the change than some of the adults. But again, in our situation, in our building, we have every classroom has a phone which is able to call out and not necessarily in. So speaking with parents and saying, look, there's ample opportunities. If a student needs a phone, we can find a space if they need to reach out and call you. Obviously, if something's going on that somebody needs to call, we would want to know anyway. And as an admin team, obviously, we want to try to address that and reach out to the families. But for a lot of those, it was just the reassurance that if they need to get in touch with you, if somebody needs to reach out, we'll find a way to make that work. No different than it used to be. So.
How about for you, Lisa? Was it kind of the same? Because high school students had a little more lenience, they had a little more flexibility there. Did you find it was a difficult
I think
transition?
parents were very much like Jonathan. My experience has been that parents have been overwhelmingly supportive. We did a lot of communication. We sent out a lot of communication before school actually started, outlining the policy, outlining what our school's specific expectations would be. We've adapted throughout the process, and anytime we've made any changes to how we do things, we've communicated that with both students, staff, and of course families. At this age level, students take a little bit more responsibility, so that's been helpful, but overwhelmingly parents have been really good. Very few interactions that have been unsupportive, and certainly, again, like Jonathan said, you may not always come to an agreement, but having a policy now to support and back us up along with code of conduct, I think has gone a long way to be able to work around some of the difficulties that were being had prior to those things.
Yeah, and I would say that the province stepping in helped parents as well, supported parents fighting their kids every day with these things too. Can I ask a question about enforcement? So what would happen? Like, say you have a scenario where a student is chronically violating this rule, and say refuses to hand over the phone or so. Like, what are kind of the steps in dealing with chronic violators of the rule? Like, do you take the phones away? Is there like other larger consequences for that use? Like, Jonathan, maybe you want to start on that one.
Yeah. To be completely honest, we haven't actually had chronic abusers of it. We were pleasantly surprised. But with that, again, the code of conduct very much outlines what those steps can be. So initially, when we put our policy in place, we were very clear with families and with students what our expectations would be and what our response would be if that was violated. Initially, like I said, we were a little more lenient in the first couple of weeks of implementation, where we were having a lot of conversations, or I guess the plan was to have a lot of conversations. It didn't happen. But just reminders of the expectation, and then we made a lot of announcements with, at at the end of this week, we're going to move forward
Okay.
with this plan. So where we're at now, and it's again outlined in the code of conduct, it's based on the student's level of understanding and the impact that it has in terms of disruption of the learning environment, those pieces. So when you look at that, if it's a first-time offender, we often have that conversation with students, what the expectation is, those reminders. Here in our building, we purchased you call it a cell phone hotel. It's a lock box that we keep in the office. It has 30 slots in it. We catch a student with a phone, and again, it doesn't happen often. It's the first attempt. We take it in the office. They come, pick their slot, they pick their number, they put it in, we lock it with them there, and then at the end of the day, you come down, we get it back. If it continues past that, we also communicate with home that this is what happened today. We had to take the phone. If it continues and it does become a chronic thing, following the code of conduct, it can lead to a suspension from school. And when we start having those conversations with parents, it becomes pretty serious pretty quick. And we typically get support on that pretty quick because, we're having the conversation. And when I'm speaking with parents, I'll say, the last thing I want to do is send a child home for this. Because again, they're going to miss out on their opportunity to learn in their best environment. But the reality, if they keep doing this, they're interrupting the environment for the other 29 kids in the room, and that's not fair. We need to come up with an agreement. We haven't gotten to that point in the year and a half now that we've been doing this. Typically, once it comes to we take it in the office, that's usually it. I mean, if it's a day after day, we may jump pretty quick to that, but we get a cell phone in September and then same student a couple months later, there's a big break in there, then we're more apt to have that conversation with the reminders, keep it for the day. There was one instance where I did have to call home, and it was unfortunately before a weekend, and it was parent needs to come in to pick up the phone. We're not going to release it back to the student. Parents, again, because we've had those ongoing conversations, they said, that's great. I will not be in. I'll be in on Monday. They'll spend the weekend without their phone. And it was the absolute last time we've had that issue with that student, as you can imagine. So
how about you, Lisa? Like given the again, the flexibility in high school, what would be stepping over the line for a high school student?
So we definitely have had suspensions. So here at Citadel, and in the policy, non-instructional time students are able to have their phones. So what we determined that to mean is that obviously before and after school, students can have their cell phones. Between classes, there's about a 5-minute window where when the bell rings for students to get to their next class. So we agreed that there would be reasons for our grade 10 to 12 students to check their phones. Maybe it's to check their class schedule. Maybe it's to check to see if they're waiting on a shift for a job or checking in on a younger sibling, making their own appointments. There are lots of reasons why students that are 15 and older may need to check a phone. At least we felt that was reasonable. So provided that a student is on their phone during the appropriate times, there's really no issue. But what we were finding at the beginning, like Jonathan, it went tickety-boo. Kids really, they got it. And I would say for the first 3 or 4 months of the school year, last year, it was remarkable. Every adult was commenting, and even the kids, for the most part, were commenting on how nice it was to be told that you couldn't use your phone, and that the adults were taking that pressure off of them. And I think that's a really important piece. Unfortunately, as the year progressed, and even now, there becomes this like exhaustion from from monitoring and checking it. So students here at Citadel, we have a Google Doc, and admin are the only people that see the Google Doc. But what we've done is our teachers will fill out if there's a student in their classroom and the student is caught with their cell phone, checking the time, texting, doesn't matter. We don't differentiate on that. If they're caught with their cell phone when they're not supposed to, so during any instructional time, the teacher fills out this very quick Google form. It auto-generates the time, the date. They fill in their own name. Actually, it auto-generates that too. They fill in the student's name and the location, the room number. And we get a notification. And if it's a student in the alphabet from R to Z, which is my end of the alphabet, then I'm waiting for them. The teacher has directed them in that moment to come to the office and turn in your phone. Yeah. And that is a conversation with an administrator. We take the phone for the remainder of the day, whether it's 9 a.m. or it's 3 p.m. We're taking the phone, we lock it in a safe, so somewhat similar to Jonathan, and we keep it. And that also triggers, we do put it in our system here. It goes into our Power School system, and it's a conference, is one of the drop-down consequences. So we note it there, and we also email or call the parent, depending on the administrator's decision, to let them know. And we let them know that the next time there could be a suspension. It's kind of top heavy, I guess, in that we take all those steps. But for the most part, students, of 1,700 kids, we have very few that are not following that, but we do have chronic non-followers. And so we look at each of those cases differently, depending on the situation. We have lots of conversations with the student, with home. In some instances, we've suspended, but after 1 day suspension, if it's continuing, we have to really weigh what the benefits are of sending a student and home and missing more time. So we have negotiated things like for an extended period of time, you drop your phone off when you arrive in school, and we lock it up, and you can have it at lunch because we're going to give it to you then, but then you need to bring it back. We have had families take their students' phones and keep them home for an extended period of time as well. But it doesn't fix all of the problems. No. And we here at Citadel, we have lots of students with more than one phone. So it doesn't always, it's not a foolproof policy, and it certainly isn't foolproof in how we apply it, but definitely from 5 years ago to now, things are definitely better.
That sounds like a really clear enforcement process you have there. I want to go back to something you said, something interesting about the students who are happy or appreciate that adults are pushing this or taking the pressure. Like, what do you think that means? If a high school student is saying, "Oh, thank God the adults are telling me I can't use my phone," where do you think that comes from? Why would they be relieved about that?
I think that, in talking to these young adults in this building and my own young adults at home, students crave, or young people crave, boundaries, and they crave, that clear-cut yes or no. And I think there's the peer pressure of using your phone, and there's the peer pressure of responding as well. Sure. And so by us saying no, and you can't, then, it basically is, they don't have to come up with an excuse why they're not part of the Snapchat group. They know that if they get caught, there's going to be a consequence. So I think that is part of them feeling that way. And I'm happy to be that person for any student, because I myself, I understand that, sometimes you feel like you have to keep being part of those things. So if this helps someone, which I think it has, but again, there are exceptions to every rule.
Of course. Well, that's kind of the next area we want to look at, is the so-called gray areas. So where would there be a situation and this is applicable to probably to all of us, where you have to make a few accommodations when it comes to an outright ban or serious restrictions? What would be some of those gray areas that you have experienced? Like medical things or a severe, really intense family dynamic. Like you mentioned, a teenager who may have to set something up with a younger sibling or something.
Mhm.
How
So
about
for
you,
us,
Jonathan? Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Oh, sorry about that. Go,
no, that's
Jonathan.
good. Go ahead, Jonathan. You can.
Yeah, I mean, for us, the medical is a big one. We have a couple of students who are diabetic. They monitor their levels themselves, which they get reported directly to their phones. So we have a
Okay.
couple of students on those plans who have permission, obviously, to have access to those phones. They have them in class. The expectation is, of course, it's away, it's in their pocket typically. They get an alert if there's something going on, and then they have some dedicated spaces that they go to address that. Outside of that, those are the only exceptions we currently have. We've had a couple of parents come with my child has some severe anxiety, needs access to a phone. And we've been able to sort of sit down and talk about what that actually looks like, and sort of dig into what in particular is the piece that's making them anxious, and what other accommodations can we make as opposed to the phone. And some of those cases may have been, listening to music when they have some of their downtime working. We're able to accommodate that with a Chromebook and some wired headphones, as opposed to they don't actually need access to their phone. There are alternatives, but outside of the medical, we haven't had anything here. Obviously, the end of our day is a little different after dismissal. After the bell, students, I mean, the day is over, they are able to get their phone. As I said at the beginning, we're about 10 minutes outside of the town of Yarmouth, so there's nowhere for kids to go in terms of leaving school property at lunch. They can't walk anywhere. There's nothing close. So, the 550 students, 450 to 500 are bus students at the end of the day. So often, it's a little chaotic at the end of the day. But after that bell, we do have to give students the opportunity, because we do have family contacting to say, you're not getting a bus today if they haven't called the office, or when you get home, you're going to notice this person's not here, go here instead.
Mhm.
But again, it's gone over well in that sense.
Okay, so I'd say that the kid with the anxiety, I think the anxiety is probably exacerbated um, by having their phone with them. But how about you, Lisa? What kinds of things up? Do you have medical cases
We do.
in
Just like
Citadel?
Jonathan, diabetes would be the number one
Okay.
medical reason. We did last year have a number of, and I hope there are no doctors here that would be offended, but we did have a number of medical doctors writing notes saying that students required their cell phones for the use
Yeah,
of.
I don't think that's legitimate anymore.
Yeah, so I mean, we did go so far as to contact some of those doctors and just say, what study, where is this coming from? Because
Yeah.
it's completely in contradiction to this policy. And we also, what we know as educators is that this is often not in any way helpful, and not what the student is actually using it for anyway.
Yeah.
So we did have some pushback on that, but we've been able to, again, navigate through conversation and, again, directing to the policy and the policymakers. And, the policy was, developed in consultation with the IWK here in Halifax, and, have, a talented group of people who are looking at students' well-being and, anxiety and whatnot. So I think we're in the exact same boat as Jonathan. The exceptions are around medical needs for the most part, and family responsibilities sometimes.
Okay. Okay. Do you see a time like I'm in Manitoba, and Manitoba has what's called it's a Franco-Manitoban school division, and it's like schools all over the province. They're one school division, but the schools are in different like geographical jurisdictions. And they've made like outright statements about actual screen time. So you mentioned a Chromebook. In that school division, there's even a limit on how much screen time total that students are allowed to have kind of by policy. So they're taking it a little bit further. I'm wondering if there's ever been any discussion in your circles around advancing it even further, especially for like you call it P to 6, yeah, especially for that age category. I'm wondering if that's something that's ever been discussed.
Not that I'm aware of, Jonathan. Are you aware of anything?
No, no, we're still in that, I guess, post-COVID era where, obviously during COVID, it was pretty technology heavy to access education, where
Right.
I think we've come to the realization where we went a little too far in one direction. There has been some, I guess, conversations about pulling back a bit and focusing more on the pen and paper and those pieces that were sort of lost for those years. But overall, I don't think there's any general conversations that certainly not that I've been a part of, that are happening in that regard.
Yeah.
I see. Oh,
Sorry to kind of jump in, but amazing conversation going on. There are like few questions also. I think one is more like a compliment about the approach at Citadel for Lisa. They are seeing the similar approach at BC. And then one question is, I'm sort of like, is is if you are noticing more socializing as kind of impact of this policy among students, or has it led to more kind of like conflicts? And also, what are the other positive things that you are observing because of this policy?
Lisa?
We actually are seeing more kids socialize. So again, taking the phones away has meant that students are actually talking to one another in class. Group work seems to be going a lot better. And kids just walking in the halls chatting instead of looking down at their phones. It definitely has made an impact. We often comment about the kids at lunch when they could have their phones. Our cafeteria holds about 500 students at lunch, and they're sitting at their tables just chatting.
I love it.
When I think, a few years ago, they would have been more inclined to be playing some sort of online game while sitting together, but not actually interacting with one another physically. So it's been a very nice change, and teachers are super happy with where students are in terms of their engagement in classrooms, which is what we're here for.
Right, right.
So why?
Or they're sitting around on a big cluster at a table and they're communicating each other through social media or texting each other when they're two inches away from each other. Yeah.
Exactly.
Sorry, Chris, to kind of like interrupt, but while we're at
Hello.
it, while we are at Lisa, specifically from your perspective, so I mean, I know policy in Nova Scotia is K to 6 bell to bell, and Jonathan, you have gone ahead and kind of like did for even grade 7 and 8. Lisa, from your perspective, what would it take, either the policy province-wide or at least in independent schools like this Citadel, to make it bell to bell for even higher grade students? Because if like this socializing aspect, which is mostly during the non-instructional time that students are socializing, if we have to move in that direction, is that a feasibility that you see? What would it take to go in that direction?
Well, that's a tough question. I mean, I think it would take, at high school level, I think it would take policy to enforce that.
Provincial policy.
A provincial policy. I mean, I do like I see the value in that, and I do I can see that from the adult's perspective, and for all the right reasons. But I also, and I think I said this when the first time I met you, Rajender, is that our students, we live in a world that uses technology. And as I said at the beginning, I have students here who are commuting by bus 45 minutes to an hour on city bus to get to their jobs after work. They could be stuck somewhere or know that they're going to be running late. We have students who are taking care of small siblings, and maybe the only person in their family that speaks enough English that if someone needs to call, they call them. So there are lots of reasons why I think students having access to their own personal devices, because we could say, well, that couldn't they call from the office phone? Yes, here at Citadel, in our main office, there is a phone devoted for students, and in every space in the building, we have phones that teachers have access to, or that they could allow a child or student to use. But ultimately, we also need to teach them. We need to relinquish some of the responsibility in a safe way, in my opinion, to these young adults. And I think, if we're taking it away, we need to slowly and more methodically release that responsibility back to them as they've kind of learned how to function without it. And here's how and why you would use your cell phone. As an adult, I needed to reach someone today outside of my work. If I wasn't allowed to do that, I don't know how I would have solved the problem. So I think we have to find a balance. And so unless the province were to put a policy in place, I don't see that happening in high schools.
You will need from a provincial mandate
That's
would
my
would help.
opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you face a pushback, Jonathan, going against the province, basically? Like not against the province, basically, but just kind of a step ahead of the province, let's put it that way.
Well, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean,
Not at
I
all.
know there's not a lot of schools in Nova Scotia that have taken this sort of
Yeah.
stance that we did, but no, we
Yeah.
certainly were supported quite a bit with it.
Yeah. And then, yeah, there is interesting question about in relation to this one. Have you been having discussions like with students, like these are some of the examples you're giving that in some situations students need phone, for example, work and all. Like, okay, then let's move towards non-smartphones, basically, because mostly it's the cameras and these apps and social media apps, which is the issue. So there is a question by Rebecca in the chat around this.
No, certainly I haven't personally had those conversations, and there are, those are definitely options. Unfortunately, manufacturers are pushing the ones that have all the fancy gadgets, and that's where our young adults are kind of living. So again, that would be something I think that is, a broader conversation to have, and not solely in education, but it's an interesting idea. It would be nice if the manufacturers were pushing those a little bit more for our youth. That
Yeah.
might be actually a great way. Under the age of such and such, you can only have this for this, with this sort of device.
Yeah. And then kind of like you said in between chronic users, and then you had to suspend repeatedly, and after a point even suspensions gets exhausted. So I'm like, are there interventions in the school more like on the side of like that they might need support in this case now, then you might have to refer to those channels?
So, I mean, in my alphabet, I have 500 students I'm responsible for, and I do currently have 3 that are highly addicted to technology and aren't attending school as a result, because they can't function without it. So that, again, that's pre this policy. I guess we have to weigh whether being here with a phone, because
Yeah.
I think students have been policing themselves quite well since this policy as well. So, I don't think you're exactly, it doesn't, because you have your cell phone, it doesn't make you popular.
Yeah.
People recognize you're breaking a rule. At least that's been my experience. But we have obviously serious illness with some of these students, and suspending students more than once or twice over a cell phone. It really, when I look at who it is we're suspending, and when we understand why they're using the phones,
Yeah.
there are reasons.
Yeah. And then we have like 2 more questions, and then sorry, Chris, I'm just kind of following
No, it's
questions and
fine.
I'll hand it back to you. So there is, Marcy is saying, would you be in support of your provincial government mandating a bell-to-bell phone policy as the Quebec government has done? Like, let's hear from Manitoba first. Chris, do you want bell-to-bell like Quebec, your provincial government announcing that for all grades, all educational institutions? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Jonathan?
I'm a hardliner on this. I don't think kids should even have smartphones until, the time they're allowed to have a driver's license. I know that's unrealistic, but yeah, I'd be in favor of that.
Jonathan, I think your vote, I'm assuming yes.
Yes, yeah, we've seen a huge change in the amount of disruption and the incidents that we've had in the building. And primarily, it is due to our stance on cell phones. So I
Yeah.
would be very much in support.
Lisa?
I think I would support it. I would worry about its impacts as well.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and then we had one question that I missed previously. Darren has asked, for the teachers, isn't it important about what the student is doing online rather than how much time they are using their tech for learning? So any thoughts on that? I'm not even sure how do we
Well, there was
convey that.
a long, I forget if it was the late 70s or early 80s. There's a long study and a report about children and their exposure to television. And one of the questions was, is it the television or is it what they're watching on television? And for the longest time, it was okay to watch Sesame Street because it was educational, instructional,
Yeah,
but not so. But over time, I think that idea was no, it's actually the television. It's
yeah,
the actual medium that is creating a lot of the problems.
yeah,
Now, I like Darren's question or his statement because there's so much, like Lisa had mentioned, and probably Jonathan too, there's so much technology and there's almost this unlimited potential for doing things productive, coding, making games, like all kinds of things that kids can engage in a vocational way. But I ultimately think that's not really what the smartphone is doing for them. I think if you don't have a smartphone and access to a smartphone, you can still be really tech savvy.
hmm hmm. Yeah, okay. We're just kind of a couple of minutes away from Chris, do you have any final questions or
Uh,
I have
No, I think we covered a lot of them. My concern now is, well, I think some people are doing a lot of the heavy work for us now. We mentioned before we started that Meta had just been slapped with a $375 million liability suit. One question we have too is like, as the great work that everybody's doing, including Lisa and Jonathan, it'd be really nice if other groups could carry some of the load too. I mean, it's nice. It's nice for parents and kids that the schools have kind of been the intermediate for the government putting a policy together, but it's still the schools enforcing it,
yeah.
right? The governments have just left it for us to do. And sorry, I meant to mention the group that Angie's part of. I didn't know that there was a phone free schools organization. That's good too. But again, it would be really helpful if like community organizations, civic governments, and would sort of enforce sort of the idea about toning down smartphone use. Let other agencies do some of the lifting for us.
Yeah, that was like my kind of like a last 30-second thing I actually wanted to hear from both Lisa, Jonathan, and maybe in Chris, like you can come back to this again.
No, I'm done talking.
Like Like, if we have to say that people who are outside the school system, and I'm saying school system, I'm not saying just the entire education system, entire K-12 education system, but outside the school system, principals, teachers, students, parents also, people who are outside the school system, if they, what is the one thing that they can do to advance this particular policy support in a way that it's better implementation or better in spirit? Like maybe I'll go to Jonathan first. What advice would you give? And this could be like even the policymakers. It doesn't have to be just general public only. Yeah.
Yeah, I think um, I don't think there's a perfect answer, but I think it's supporting or really digging deep into what are some of the underlying reasons why a student or a child in that sense feels they need to have that connection to a phone, and having conversations to help bridge that and help troubleshoot, well, what's really going on and what other ways can we accommodate, what other things can we do or put in place to support that. We work closely with our health department with mental health, where again the concern isn't necessarily I need to have my phone. It's why is that? And let's dig into that and how can we support that piece so you don't necessarily feel that you have to have that connection. If we could have everybody on the same page in supporting those underlying needs, because again, it all comes down to feeling that there's some sort of need not being met. If we could dig deep and sort of work together to figure those pieces out, I think you could see a
Yeah.
shift.
Yeah. And Lisa, your take on this, what's the people outside the system should do it, outside the school system?
I think we need to look at what this, sort of as Jonathan said, what this cell phone, what it is fulfilling for students, and where could we replace that fulfillment. So, whether it's that parents are working astronomical amounts of time, and this is a solution to keep students or young people pacified, if it's that people aren't educated enough and simply think that they can, this is a way to do that. Whatever the reason is, we're handing these weapons over so early in children's lives that they become so addicted, or whatever word we want to use, at such an early age. I do again think that we need to look at when we're allowing young people to have access to this, and teaching responsibility and proper usage more explicitly.
Chris, any final? We are over time, but still.
Well, I'm just so glad that this is finally happening. Like I mentioned earlier, I even find like I came late to the game in 2017 when that group was looking at data that had sort of popped up even 4 or 5 years before that. So I'm glad we're actually taking a stand on this, or offering perspectives, I should say, and reasonable perspectives, because it's no longer like correlation. I mean, smartphone exposure has been linked causally now to all kinds of afflictions, especially for, well, I'll say adolescent girls. They seem to be the most vulnerable, statistically at least. That's what the evidence is saying. But just this like the point in your life where your brain is still developing, it's a or potentially a very dangerous setting to find yourself in. So I'm glad adults are finally in the room with this, right? So.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you. Thank you. Actually, we are 4 minutes over the time. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Chris. And thanks to everyone who joined, who are listening to us. And we'll also it's recorded, so we'll save it and put it out if people want to refer to it later. But thank you everyone for taking out time and joining. This is an important conversation.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.